So there's a comrade by the name of JT. He has a channel called Second Thought. And I've been subscribed to his channel for quite some time now. And he's put out very good videos, especially ones that explain the socialist and also explaining what's going on around the world in regards to the way it relates to our mode of production, the way it relates to how we're treated as citizens within this country, as we call the Imperial Core. And so he does great work, and it's very digestible, right? 15 to 20 minutes and one and done. So all you need is 15, 20 minutes, watch, and then you'll get that information, right? It's a good shot in the arm, especially for class analysis. And so that's one of the reasons why I like his channel a lot. He put out a video, and he's typically pretty careful in how he maneuvers, right? This time he said, there's no maneuvering this. This has to be set. And he sounded like RBN. Yes. Was this video cathartic? You bet your ass it was cathartic. What on point? You bet your ass it was on point. Did an RBN member get featured? Not physically featured, but one of their tweets get featured in this video. You bet your ass. I make some damn good tea. So we're going to get into it because there are, and then some people who I respect on Twitter, that their viewpoints were also shared as well. But I want to get into this because this is something I think a lot of people, especially with the onset of what happened since October 7th with the Palestinian resistance, and now it's really more of a mask off, even more when it comes to liberals. And make no mistake, right? People like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like Ron DeSantis and Matt Gaetz and all these conservatives, right? We know they're horrible, right? We know that. It's like it's no surprise. And believe me, you, when Trump wins, because we know he's going to win in November, when he wins, you don't think that we're not going to hold his feet to the fire just like we did Biden? You don't think we're not going to lambaste him? Oh, stay tuned. So, but I should say my deal is, we want you to know that the liberals are just as bad as the conservatives. Somebody may say no. Well, there's some historical figures who also agree with me. So let's get into this. And I hope you guys got your tea, your popcorn ready, because this is going to be an interesting reaction. So shout out to Second Thought. If you guys have not subscribed to this channel, please make sure to do that. He does amazing work. So, JT, take it away.
And others like it are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support this channel, join our growing Discord server, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderates I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling. You take him for a friend.
All right. Rolling. Okay, let's go. Over the past 5 months, just about everyone I know has come to the same conclusion. Dyed-in-the-wool liberals are as much the enemy of normal, decent people as conservatives are. And when I say liberal, I don't mean your average Joe who likes Harry Potter and Marvel movies and doesn't really think about politics outside of election years.
Will you shut up, man?
I mean the people who love Harry Potter and Marvel movies and also go out of their way to scold Palestinians for resisting their own extermination.
Oh! This is why I wanted to play this. So he starts off with two of the most polarizing figures in U.S. history. You have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and you have Malcolm X, both saying the same thing. This is basically the equivalent of Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto saying the same thing. By the way, just to let you guys know, in Marvel, Charles Xavier and Magneto were modeled after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, by the way. But anyways, so they're saying the same thing because they reached the same conclusion because they have been observing how the white moderate, aka the white liberal, and by the way, these days it's not just that classification of white. That's why on the thumbnail I also have Kamala Harris and Hakeem Jeffries. Make no mistake about it. It is a personification. It is not necessarily an immutable characteristic anymore. It's that white moderate of the heart, that white moderate of the mind. That is what is some of the most dangerous thought processes in this country. And also, while we're talking about identity, I also say to the LGBTQ moderates too, the LGBTQ liberals, because guess what? I'm gay, so I'm going to call my people out. Yes, you LGBTQ people who are liberals, who will always side with the Democrats, when in reality, they don't give a shit about you, me, nobody who's trans, nobody who's non-binary, nobody who's lesbian, nobody's gay, nobody's bi. They don't care. Let's be real. This is who this is directed towards. Because I am sick and tired of the gays that are always coming in and going, well, what about Project 2025? What about Project 2025? Because if it wasn't for Obama sitting on his damn hands, well, we wouldn't have gotten Trump. If it wasn't for Bill Clinton throwing the left under the bus like he classically did, we wouldn't have got George W. Bush. And yet, oh, that's the best we can do. Anywho, I don't want to go on a huge tirade right now, even though I really want to. Look, I don't know what the hell was inside that tea. But I'm on. Let's continue. JT, please take it away.
People who demand you condemn Hamas while refusing to acknowledge that history didn't begin on October 7th. People who split their time evenly between rewatching Hamilton and calling anyone who criticizes Joe Biden a Russian troll or a Chinese spy. I think you know the type. But just so we're on the same page before we go any further, let me be extra clear. Liberalism is the default ideology in the imperial core. The average person ends up with a liberal perspective by osmosis. There is a pipeline from simply existing in the empire to becoming a rabid servant of the empire. And if you feel like this is an attack on you personally, please don't feel that way. Everyone should be capable of changing their perspective when presented with new evidence. If you're not, that's a good sign you may have been indoctrinated into a dangerous ideology. But that's what this video is about. I'm going to give you just a little bit of evidence that Western liberals are a tremendous force for evil. And contrary to what they want you to believe, they absolutely do not care about truth, justice, peace, or progress. Let's start.
What did Martin Luther King Jr. say? They want peace, as in the absence of justice. Peace meaning they want you to suffer quietly. Oh my God, you got shot? Oh, can you scream in pain? Don't scream in pain. Just muffle yourself. Will you? And look, you got blood all over my shoe. What's the matter with you? Oh my God, these people are doing these horrible things to you. I just wish you protested more peacefully. You know, you'll never get people to listen to you if you burn down that Target. I may end up going over in time on this one.
Let's start with the civil rights era. A lot of Americans today erroneously believe that when Dr. King came onto the scene, he magically opened everyone's eyes and ended racism. Sure, things were bad back then, but his words were so moving that everyone put down their pitchforks and agreed that we were all equal. And of course, the white liberals were marching hand in hand with black Americans to forge a path to a brighter future. While MLK did have a profound way with words, and there were indeed a number of white Americans who marched for equal rights, this simplified view of the civil rights era is exceptionally misleading. Martin Luther King is one of the most co-opted figures in modern history. Everyone tries to claim him for their particular set of beliefs. I made a whole video about how history whitewashes black radicals. But the thing about these people waxing poetic about how great King was is that 90% of the time they would have hated the man had they lived in the same era. Think about your family members today and how they reacted to the Black Lives Matter rallies and protests. If they're anything like my family, you probably heard some pretty ignorant, hateful statements. The same exact thing happened in Dr. King's time. Police brutality, rampant racism, and constant attempts to misconstrue what the movement was really about. The thing that always concretizes that fact for me is this comic, by the white moderate cartoonist Charles Brooks. King talking to a reporter with the city destroyed in the background and some white people lying on the ground, and King saying, "I plan to lead another non-violent march tomorrow."
It is recorded fact that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died with a 75% disapproval rating in the United States of America. Most people hated him. This includes liberals. So it's any wonder why that now they suddenly, oh my God, we have to judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. You hated him. The people who are Joe Biden's age, the people who are Nancy Pelosi's age, the people who are Mitch McConnell's age, the people who were born during the Second World War, People that age, they hated him. They couldn't stand him. What makes you think that shit changed? What makes you think it changed at all? The same dude that said, I don't want my kids to grow up in a racial jungle. What did Maya Angelou say? When someone tells you who they are the first time, believe them. By the way, 50% of black people hated him. So, those Richie Torreses, those Kamala Harrises, right? Those Zerlina Maxwells, those Joyanne Reeds, they also would have hated him too. Because you're messing things up for the rest of us. Those Oprah Winfreys would have hated him. Those Tyler Perrys would have hated him. That's not the way we need to go about this. Can you imagine in Nat Turner's Rebellion, some slaves going, well, I just don't think that we should be doing this because what's the other master's going to think about the rest of us? You see how it goes? Because the white moderate, the white liberal, what they do is that they will also influence other black people into taking on the same exact position. And then guess what? Then they start to come up to us using their skin color, using their proximity to their own community, and saying, hey, we gotta cool down a little bit. If you want to change the police, then just become a police officer yourself. Change it from the inside. You want to change the Democratic Party? You run in the Democratic Party and you change it from the inside. Meanwhile, let's continue.
This is exactly what we see today. Liberals get uncomfortable and suddenly they're not for equal rights anymore. Or more accurately, they still say they are, but they just have some concerns about optics. That's not how you're supposed to protest. Why can't everyone just protest peacefully? Why? So you can ignore it? The entire point of protest is to be disruptive. But even if we put that aside, no one wants to have to protest.
Now, hang on. This is why they don't want us to protest. Because they don't want to be bothered. I'm going to share something with you guys really quick because I saw this and it bothered me in my spirit. Because these are the same people that will say, well, we just gotta, we agree with you. You just have to go about it a different way. And the thing is that we have been trying to go about it a different way for a long ass time. But every single time we try to go about it that way, y'all don't pay attention. So guess what we do? We have to make noise. So I'm gonna, let me see. Yes, here it is. I'm gonna play this for you guys to prove JT's point. Because this is something I think that a lot of liberals just do not understand. And I'll get back to the video in a second. But I want to share this with you guys. This is a perfect encapsulation of the white moderate. And by the way, he's doing this to another white guy. This is at a town hall.
Palestinian children
How many have a question? How many children need to be killed? How many have a question? You sit there. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Don't bother my conscience. I don't want to hear I don't want to hear about little children being bombed using my federal dollars. Don't do it. You're bothering me. You're making my heart break. I don't want to feel for my fellow human beings. Shut the fuck up and sit down. That doesn't sound very empathetic to me. The gentleman that started protesting, his disruption was love for fellow people. The gentleman that stood up and started screaming at him to sit down, that is a hatred for that love to be shown in public. Because he doesn't want to be bothered here. That's a white liberal. And it's not just limited to age. Because people will be like, well, he's a boomer. No. It's not just limited to age. Because I've seen Gen X do it. I've seen millennials do it. Hell, I'm starting to see Gen Z do it. The likelihood is a little bit less, but some of them do it too. And it's all about decorum, right? This is what I was talking about. So, let's get back to the video. Because JT's cooking. JT's cooking with hot grease right now. Let's continue.
Have to protest. They want things to change with as little friction as possible. But that's just not how things work when the oppressor class likes their position, and that position is dependent upon subjugating another class. It's like Castro said during the Cuban Revolution. The people did not choose the path of armed struggle. It was the path that was forced upon them. Same with Palestine. The number of tweets I've seen from liberals saying, I don't understand why they can't just peacefully protest, is insane. And every single time, someone claps back with a different instance of Palestinians peacefully organizing and being killed all the same. By the time King penned his letter from Birmingham jail, which you heard some of at the beginning of this video, he had become disenchanted with white northern liberals, who had earlier in his career been his greatest source of white support. But when King started talking about systemic issues that intersected with racism, such as economic inequality, these liberals started to squirm. The comfortable whites who looked down on the Southern yokels for their ignorance and racism were now in the hot seat themselves. They benefited from a two-tiered society in which liberal elites were at the top. And so the complaint about optics was born. Look, Dr. King, we support your ideals, but the way you're protesting just isn't okay. This is the way liberals operate. They support emancipation movements in theory, but as soon as it crosses into the realm of the material, they become no different than conservatives.
Perfect timing, because whenever we actually want to enforce change, and when people do not listen to us, then it's like, well, you guys should do it a different way. Dr. King said, a riot is the language of the unheard. What happens when people aren't listening to you? Does your voice get louder? Do you become more boisterous? This was during the Black Lives Matter protest. I want you guys to listen to this. You guys probably heard this before, but this is impactful. I want you to really just sit with this, especially if you're white and you consider yourself a moderate or a liberal. Listen to this. Right there. See, everybody wants to focus on the what. They want to focus on, well, look at them. They're stealing. Why are they stealing? It's just like when I shared a tweet about them having to lock up baby formula. Well, they just want to steal baby formula and sell it so they can make more money. Why is it worth money on the black market? Why is baby formula worth it? If I had things my way, baby formula would be worth hardly anything on the black market because it would be a government provision to be given away for mothers who are feeding their kids, mothers and fathers to feed their kids, parents to feed their kids. Meaning you can try to sell it on the black market, but everybody's like, well, it's available everywhere, so it's not really worth anything for me to get it from you. Focus on the why. Now, this sister, she cooks. Can you smell it? I can't tell.
And that's
Before I let her continue to cook, what did Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? It is really an insult to tell a bootless man to pull himself up by his bootstraps. We ain't got boots. Baby, we ain't got socks. Baby, we don't even have feet in this country. And you're telling us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Mm-mm.
America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this.
And when we say we are owed reparations, oh, people will scoff at us and say, "Oh, well, it didn't happen directly to you." Meanwhile, the people who still have wealth passed down from them to them from their ancestors who owned slaves, who were enslavers, why should they be able to keep that wealth? Because they didn't personally own slaves, so they shouldn't be able to keep the wealth that was built from owning the slaves. So therefore, if we are not owed any reparations, then the people who are the descendants of the enslavers should not get any of the inheritance that their ancestors gave to them. That means that money should be null and void. If we can't get money for the work that our ancestors have done for free in this country, then the people who receive for free should not get any of the benefits at all. None. Absolutely not. Because that's what's fair. And if you are going to say, well, that's not fair, it's their ancestors got the money. Well, guess what? Our ancestors did the work. So pay the fuck up. That's how it goes. If you want to be logical, let's be logical. Hi, welcome to RBN. My name is JB Font. Nice to have you. If you guys have not, please go ahead and give the stream a like. Let's continue. Remember the move bombing that happened in the 1980s? Yes, the United States actually bombed a black neighborhood in the 1980s. Oh, yeah, you guys didn't realize that, did you? Oh, yeah, it's not that far back. I was a baby. I was a little kid. The United States government would never do that. So, when the white moderates and liberals say, well, just do things peacefully, just do things more organized. That should be the answer. That should be the answer. Let's continue on. Take it away, JT.
If violent protest is illegal, and nonviolent protest gets your liberal supposed supporters to condemn your movement, what recourse do you have to effect change? There's a reason imperial core countries are actively trying to criminalize various forms of protest.
Now, as we speak right now, the National Guard is actually detaining pro-Palestinian protesters in the subways in New York. That's it, right? So, who's to blame? Governor Kathy Hochul. But guess what? I don't care if you're a conservative. You'll be like, well, look, that's a blue state. Ron DeSantis has also made it so that he limits the types of protests that we can do here in Florida. So it goes on both sides of the coin. So don't sit there and go, red states are doing this or blue states are doing that. They're all part of the same, two cheeks on the same ass. And in between them is just poop. That's all it is. I'm telling you right now, when people talk about, when they try to do red states do this or blue states do that, that's just partisanship. That's the red game, blue game. You might as well be talking about the Yankees versus the Red Sox. And the funny part about it is they're all owned by the same people.
They have a vested interest in things remaining the same. As Kwame Ture said in his 1969 book, The Pitfalls of Liberalism, what a liberal really wants is to bring about change which will not in any way endanger his position. That is, of course, impossible when we're talking about fixing the systemic problems of racism, imperialism, and economic inequality. According to a 1966 Harris poll, King's favorable rating among white Americans was just 27%. Compare that to 95% today. That's how liberals operate. They oppose
27% favorable rating. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a lower favorable rating before he died than Joe Biden does right now. Think about that. 27% approval? We're talking about how Joe Biden is going to get creamed in November, and he has what, a 34 to 36% approval rating? Try 27%. That's how much they hated him. And yet now, They say, oh, we love him, we praise him. We'll build monuments in his name. But when it comes to the things that he actually advocated for, they're not willing to actually do it. What did Dr. Martin Luther King say? We're going to come and get our check. Every single time we try to get our check, guess what? Oh, well, we just need to do research on it. There's no more research that needs to be done. I had the gentleman, the activist on from the Negro Collective on my channel, not this Saturday, but the last Saturday. We talked about reparations. The research is done. Right? Yet they still don't want to do it.
They oppose any attempts at emancipation while they're happening, then pretend they were always on the side of the righteous when they have the benefit of history books telling them who the good guys were. There's a great tweet that really sums up this liberal tendency. A liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war and supports all civil rights movements except the one going on right now.
Think about what's going on in Gaza. Think about that. Think about the liberals who are getting mad at us for standing up and saying ceasefire now. Think about them. Right? these people, man, I'm telling you. Oh, gosh. Oh, and by the way, they did the same thing during the Iraq War.
Now, while MLK was outspoken in his disappointment with white liberals, Malcolm X went a critical step further and correctly labeled them an enemy of genuine progress and liberation. The conservatives are wolves. You know what they're up to. They're evil and they're honest. Not because they care about being honest, but because they're not afraid to wield power when they have it. The liberal is a fox. Less outwardly threatening, even seemingly approachable, but still a predator. A conservative will usually be open about their racism and how they need to keep the dirty foreigners out. Whereas a liberal will say things like, I see you, I hear you, hate has no place here. And then they'll run campaign ads about how conservatives are failing to secure the southern border. Biden hasn't stopped building Trump's wall. That should tell you everything you need to know about the liberal approach to immigration. Pretend you're deeply concerned, and then do the same thing the conservatives are doing. Or take the genocide in Gaza. We've seen a handful of the more liberal Democrats speak out against what Israel is doing, which is no small feat for a politician in the United States. But then when push comes to shove, they do the evil thing anyway. As I'm writing this script, every single Senate Democrat just voted to continue funding the genocide in Gaza.
Shout out to Professor Zinkus. But yes, they're all complicit. This is why we say to leave both parties. Because you do not want to be complicit with accessories to murder. I don't care if it's AOC. I don't care if it's Pramila Jayapal. I don't care if it's Mark Pocan. I don't care if it's Bernie fucking Sanders. They are complicit in murder. Complicit. Do you want to be associated with people like that? I sure as hell don't.
Every single one. It's like the meme. The people on the receiving end of US militarism don't care whether the people who sent the bombs are deeply concerned about it. They're still sending the bombs. Socialists like me tend to joke about Democrats just being Republicans with a rainbow flag painted on their bombers, but it's absolutely true. The liberals' only objection to imperialism and global domination is on aesthetic grounds. They may say they're cool with gay people, but they're still going to turn the rest of the world to glass if it means maintaining our hegemony.
Yep.
A good example of this meaningless liberal pandering is when Pharrell recently sent Trump a cease and desist to stop Trump from using his songs at rallies. And then he turned around and performed at a fundraising gala for the IDF. The people who've killed...
So they can talk about how they have solidarity with people who are marginalized, and yet somebody like Pharrell Williams, he'll still allow and play for Zionists. Beyonce can talk all she wants about women's empowerment. She can talk all she wants about Black liberation. She can even, put on a Black military suit, hold up the fist all she wants, and yet she is still going to perform in Israel, where the IDF literally trains our police force to bash us in the head here. Does she really have solidarity with her people? TLDR, no. Taylor Swift does not give a crap about us because she'll also perform in Tel Aviv because it makes her money, even though all of those women, and by the way, the instance of miscarriages has went up 300% in Gaza. But that doesn't mean much to her because she wants to play in the only democracy that's in the Middle East. By the way, just to let you know, there were other democracies in the Middle East beforehand. Mohammed Mossadegh was democratically elected in Iran until the United States showed up. Democracy, my ass. Let's continue.
Who've killed 11,000 children in the past few months, who have targeted doctors saving injured people, journalists show the world what's happening, the people who blindfolded him to run and then sniped him in the back of the head. Okay, celebrities is one thing, but when you have a liberal world, that's when things get really dangerous. Take Trudeau, for example. In response to one of the many ongoing protests for Palestine in Canada, on February 13th, he posted the following on Twitter. The demonstration at Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday was reprehensible. Hospitals are places for treatment and care, not protest and intimidation. I strongly condemn this display of anti-Semitism. In Toronto and across Canada, we stand with Jewish communities against this hate. This is insane. If you've been online at all in the last 5 months, you'll know where I'm going with this. Justin Trudeau, liberal darling, has supported to the hilt the Israeli apartheid regime, which has every single hospital in Gaza out of operation. Not only that, these monsters also dressed as doctors and nurses and infiltrated a hospital to shoot and terrorize the patients and heroic staff inside.
Isn't Justin Trudeau the same guy that actually stood in applause for a Nazi soldier? Scratch a liberal. Scratch a liberal, baby. And it bleeds.
To the liberal, walking outside a hospital and demanding justice is a bridge too far. But butchering an entire population because it serves the interest of capital is perfectly acceptable. The justification for statements like Trudeau's has always been opposing anti-Semitism. That obviously doesn't work anymore. It's an absurd claim to make that criticizing a genocidal apartheid regime is anti-Semitic. And it's become even more clearly absurd now that we've seen hundreds of thousands of Jewish people around the world stand up against Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign and say, "You do not represent us." All you have to do is look at footage from within Israel itself. Jews are brutalized by the fascist police for daring to speak out against the regime. The anti-Semitism charge obviously doesn't work anymore, so the liberals have fallen back on what they do best, weaponizing vague feelings. The main objection to rallies for Palestine now is that it makes people feel uncomfortable or unsafe on college campuses in the West. Here's an example.
Well, what do you know? Who is that tweet that we see there? Well, isn't it our comrade Nick from RBN? Isn't you just love to see it? What did Nick say? Let's take a look. He said, These white women tears are one of the most dangerous weapons in the world. These white tears got countless black men murdered. These white tears enabled the bombing of brown kids and genocide. Zay Squirrel said this video of some college students literally crying crocodile tears because there's a pro-Palestinian demonstration happening as they hysterically demand the security guard to arrest them all, perfectly encapsulates Zionism and its depraved cult of fake victimhood. Let's continue.
An example that's been making the rounds online.
Everyone is dead. Please end it, please.
Aside
By the way, the young lady that's like, they want us dead. She's there with her Starbucks coffee in hand. Oh my God. They want to kill us. They want me dead. Can you believe this? You need to arrest them all. Oh, this pumpkin spice latte is so good. Should got an extra shot of espresso. Meanwhile, there are little girls that are her age that are under the rubble in Gaza.
Aside from the fact that those are the most obvious fake tears you've ever seen, I want you to think about the absurdity of this display. Claiming to feel unsafe in your insular little university versus this.
مين بدك مين بدك؟
امي مع اخويا.
طيب انت ايش؟
اخويا ابو نسرة كمان.
That's what unsafe looks like. You feel uncomfortable? Think about how uncomfortable it is to have no food or clean water, no shelter, no hygiene products, your family killed, the places you've been told will be safe purposefully targeted with bombing runs. Liberals have no right to cry crocodile tears and pretend to feel unsafe. Of course, they'll still do it, and sometimes it will work. There are very few weapons as dangerous as a white woman's tears, as minorities have learned the hard way throughout history. Enough.
How do you think Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma got burned to the ground? White woman's tears. That's how an entire city, an economic center, got burned to the ground. How do you think Emmett Till died? Tears of a white woman, even though he was falsely accused. Tied him to the back of a truck and dragged his body. Beat him, bludgeoned. Then they dumped his body in a body of water. That's what they did to Emmett Till. The lady who made the claim, she recently died as an old lady comfortable in her bed. She got to live her rest of her life into old age. Emmett Till was only, 13, 14 years old? We know what it's like.
Enough pretend fear and they get what they want. In this case, the criminalizing of solidarity with the people currently being exterminated. I made a tweet the other day that said, one thing that's been bothering me recently is that I have no power to make liberals care. I can say, I will never again speak to someone who still supports Israel, but what good is that? The hate and powerlessness I feel is something I haven't experienced before. I had one commenter respond with something I think is important to share. This is how colonized people have felt forever. Liberals act like they care, but they don't. They really, really don't. And their fake performative caring actually makes it way worse. At least right-wingers are honest.
And this is why we talk about the Democratic Party the way we do. If I have a pile of doo-doo sitting right there, you know it's a pile of doo-doo. I ain't got to tell you nothing. You see it, you smell it, you see the flies all over it, you know exactly what it is, baby. I ain't got to tell you nothing. But if someone took some ice cream scoops and then molded it to look like ice cream and put some chocolate sprinkles on top, wouldn't it be incumbent upon me to go, hey, don't touch that. Don't touch that. That's doo-doo. It just looks like chocolate ice cream. It don't smell good, does it? Because they don't want you to know that they are the covert imperialists, covert racists, covert sexists. Yes, sexist. Because if they actually cared about women, they would have codified Roe v. Wade into law. They're covert homophobes and transphobes. Yes, covert. Because if they actually would have actually cared about those of us who are LGBTQ, they would have given us free healthcare so that our trans siblings can actually get their care that they need. We wouldn't have to go and break the bank for the medications, especially for HIV medications, for PrEP and all that. We wouldn't have to do that. We will have housing for all. So that all those little LGBTQ youth that get kicked out of their houses and live on the street homeless, they wouldn't have to worry about being homeless. If they actually cared about those of us that are disabled, would our disability checks be as low as they are right now? See, that's the thing. There's covert and there's overt. Conservatives, overt. Liberals, covert.
That's a great point, and it echoes what Malcolm X said half a century ago. Liberals are no better than conservatives. They're often even more bloodthirsty, as we've seen with their recent behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that separates a liberal servant of empire from a conservative one is that the liberal will lie through their teeth to make it seem like they're on your side. At least when a conservative says they want you dead, you can believe it and brace for impact. With a liberal, you have to be a lot more vigilant. Conservatives don't care if they have the moral high ground. They want what they want, and they don't care how you feel about it. A liberal will twist themselves into knots trying to convince you, and often themselves, that they are the moral arbiter of modern politics. Even the liberals who are critical of Joe Biden and the wider West's enabling of this genocide often speak out in a way that ends up reinforcing belief in liberalism. Take the recent drama surrounding Jon Stewart. He said some common sense stuff about Biden and really pissed off the vote blue no matter who crowd. But his criticisms also really resonated with the masses of more casual liberals in the imperial core. His statements were intended to air the concerns of people starting to feel cognitive dissonance about their support of genocide, and then to steer them back into the fold of the Democratic Party. Yeah, Biden may be too old for the job, but we'll do better next time. The most important thing is keeping Trump out of the White House. Things would be so much worse under a Republican, believe me. Never mind, of course, that things are only this bad because Biden, liberal champion of peace and freedom, has personally refused to call off his attack dog and has instead spent billions of dollars of your tax money to fund the massacre of tens of thousands of men, women, and children whose only crime is trying to prevent the slow-rolling eradication of their people and their history.
Oh my gosh. If Trump gets into office, the genocide is going to be even worse. That's like telling a domestic violence victim, well, even though your new boyfriend is beating you to a pulp, well, if you get back with your old boyfriend, well, he'll beat you even more. So you might as well stay with this boyfriend. Does that make sense to you? stay with your abuser because the other option is more abuse? Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense to me. It's either die by fire, die by burning, or die by drowning. Which one do you want? Meanwhile, we're just trying to say we don't want to die at all.
I could go on like this, or hell, I could just leave the video running and play the hundreds of hours of footage showing what Western liberals are enabling in Gaza. Children torn to pieces hanging from piles of rubble. A man so stricken with grief that he loses consciousness after being told his entire family has been killed. A beautiful little girl, my daughter's age, standing alone in the cold, waiting for parents, will never come back. But I know that footage will not soften the liberal heart. If they've made it this far and not changed their mind, they are irredeemable. And I...
That part. They're TFG. Too far gone. How do you allow these corporate dictators to push you to remove your humanity from yourself, to take your humanity away? How do you allow that? My God. But you have the wherewithal to fake it? You fake your humanity, but when it comes into question, you just leave it behind? That's sadistic. Damn.
And I will not waste any more of my time trying to win over my enemy. And for those who think I'm being overly harsh and that liberals are annoying but really all dangerous, I'll cite just one more historical fact. Every time liberals have been given the choice between socialism and fascism, they have sided with fascism. And when I say they've sided with fascism, that's actually a little misleading. Yes, normal liberals, the individuals, will always pick a well-dressed white fascist over a scary urban communist. But liberals, as a political organism, don't really choose to side with fascism as much as they devolve into it. Fascism is rooted in the same Western mythology as liberalism. Whereas in times of peace and prosperity, liberalism has all the frills and niceties normal people would expect from a first world country. As soon as the economic base falters, as soon as the lines start to go down, the mask comes off. It's often said that fascism is capitalism in decay. And if there's one thing we've seen with the United States since the Reagan years, it's that capitalism is on the decline. There's a reason we're always at war, why our civil liberties are being curtailed under conservative and liberal leaders alike, why Joe Biden is holding twice as many immigrants in cages as Trump was at the end of his term, why we're backing Israel to the very last Palestinian. When capital has to circle the wagons to maintain its dominance, its rhetoric and actions start to look a lot like fascism. The reason for this is simple. Fascism is seen as a solution to an economic problem, just as socialism is. But the difference is that fascism does not threaten the primacy of capital, or the comfortable position of the white liberal. Economic hardship creates conditions where bitterness, distrust, and desperation can thrive, making the masses an easy target for charismatic and bombastic fascists. I'll end with a gentle warning for new socialists, people who understand that imperialism is wrong, but who may still harbor some liberal ideology from their upbringing. There's this pervasive belief that if you just show people enough data that something is bad, we'll reach a critical mass of collective outrage, and then suddenly, through legal and government-approved means, we'll be able to stop the bad thing. That's just not how the real world works. That's become abundantly clear in the last 5 months. Bit by bit, our rights to protest, to assemble, to speak out are being taken away. The Palestinian people have tried peaceful protest for years. They've tried appealing to international bodies. They've tried everything. They are well within their rights to resist their executioners by whatever means they deem appropriate. No amount of liberal hand-wringing and phony moral objections will change that fact.
You don't get freedom peacefully. Freedom is never safeguarded peacefully. Anyone who is depriving you of freedom isn't deserving of a peaceful approach by the ones who are being deprived of their freedom.
A few times in the last couple of years,
Think about how this country got started. Was it through peaceful means? Did somebody just write a very flowery, nicely worded letter to King George and say, "Dearest King George, we would like to have our independence. Would you be willing to give that to us?" And then King George said, "You know what? I think that's a great idea. You guys can have your independence as well. I think we have enough riches here in England. You go ahead. You guys have your own country now." Is that how it went down in 1776? If you think that's how it went down, then you need a history lesson. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never have, and it never will. Right there. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. And it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Frederick Douglass. Now, let's finish this.
I found myself thinking, surely not these liberals. Surely this friend or this educated person or this family member will be different. And they disappoint every single time. At some point, all decent people have to realize that liberals are as much the enemy as conservatives. They may weaponize inclusive language, they may try to trick you into thinking they care, but it's a lie. The Western liberal position on Palestine should be the final nail in the coffin of liberal legitimacy. And I know it's not my job to call people out like this. I know my role is to be inclusive and offer a charitable on-ramp into socialist ideas. But sometimes you just have to tell it like it is. Malcolm X was right. Liberals are the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. I mentioned at the beginning.
Thank you so much for that, JT. Much appreciated. I want to share something with you guys because people will say, well, there just has to be another way. And we exhaust whatever we can do in order to mitigate any harm to the people. That's what we do, right? Because we want people to be as safe as possible. But we have to be vigilant. Let me share this with you guys because this is from Kwame Ture. So take this as a lesson.
One more question. I'm sorry.
I'd just like to state an opinion. You said that capitalism is backwards and it should be destroyed. Stupid,
Reactionary,
repulsive.
and barbaric. No, I didn't use the
Yeah.
word repulsive. That's too mild.
Well, I'd just like to state my opinion that I think violence is barbaric and stupid and repulsive, and That's my opinion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a liberal. Now, let's listen to how Kwame Ture responds to this liberal posturing, this paternalistic moral posturing with a question.
But please, may I ask you a question, please? Just for clarification. All right, now, I'm not sure, are you agreeing that capitalism is bad or you don't think it's bad?
I didn't say.
Huh?
I didn't say anything about it.
But what do you think about it?
Capitalism?
Yes.
Well,
Well, let me ask you this question.
I live in a capitalist society.
Okay, let me make it
and-
easier. Let me make it easier.
Okay, yeah, please. Yeah.
If you were a slave and I were your master,
I'd
and
hate
the
you.
only way for you to be free was to strike your blow to kill me, what would you do? You didn't answer? You didn't answer? Oh. I didn't hear him answer.
Liberation is always a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. A lot of times when we talk about these things, a lot of times people go, what do we do? Because there's really, it seems hopeless. And that's not the goal. This is to wake people up, to let them know, look, they're not on your side. But what can be done? Building community is one of the best ways to grow and to create a dual power so that we can actually liberate ourselves from this system that keeps us subjugated. There are different organizations that we can join in order to not only learn, but to also do mutual aid and grow. Here in Orlando, we have the Orlando RBN Mutual Aid Group. So whenever we have our next action, make sure to tune in to RBN, to Community Notes, and I will put that out there so you guys can join us in doing mutual aid, actual action on the ground. And then you can associate with us and you can learn and grow just like we're learning and growing together. There's Real Orlando. They do great work on the ground. They're teaching here in Orlando. They do, in fact, let me share their Instagram so that you guys have that link as well. Because these are groups where you can actually not only do on the ground work, but learn together with them as well as build community. And that's also deeply important because that is how we change things. So I'm going to share the screen really quick. So these are some of the groups. This is some of the groups here in Orlando. And I'm sure there are other groups in your respective city that you can join. There is, for instance, I know Nick from RBN, our comrade Nick, he talks about KC tenants. So if you're in Kansas City, then you can probably join a tenants union or a tenants organization, right? If you're near Boston area, you can join Savvy Sabs and her mutual aid chapter in Boston. If you're near Detroit, you can team up with Rome. If you're in LA, you can team up with CJ. But these are some of the things that you can do. This is Real Orlando. I put the link in the chat. They also do People's Free Kitchen. I put out a video a few weeks back of me interviewing the person who runs People's Free Kitchen. And they were talking about having a politic of care, taking care of the unhoused in their community, and also using that as a means to teach, to build up the working class so that we can have solidarity with one another and then build that dual power. So this is some of the ways in which we can do something even when we may feel hopeless. So do not adopt the same morally depraved, morally repugnant ideology of the liberals, because they do not care about you. They do not care about workers. Stick with your community and learn from them. All the great revolutionaries were involved in communities. That's how it's done.